So here I have the cluster off of the 98 Beetle 2 liter. And to get this apart, I got 4 little Phillips screws here. I got one here, one here, one here, and one here. And this will relieve the back, and the back will come off, this white cluster. And then on the front, to get this panel, you got to be very careful with these clips. These clips are so fragile. It's white plastic painted black, and that white plastic is so brittle. But anyways, you got 2 little clips here. I'm going to take off this Boyd tag. You'll see you got a metal clip right there to relieve, and a metal clip right there. Those will go flying when you pop them, so be careful. So I'm going to pop those off, and then the glass just, or it's not glass, the plastic, kind of be careful with it, getting it out of this right here on these 2 top ones. I like to kind of slide down on it before I just pull it out, because if you try to lift these up to get it out, you're going to bust those off. So I'm going to go ahead and pop that lens off. So to pull these out, they hook on the front and they come and snap in the back. And what I usually do is just an old knife, get it down in here, and kind of twist forward with it and pop it out of the back. And see, it'll pop right out. And when you put it on, the hook part goes on the front, comes over to the back. You got to make sure you got everything on it straight, then it just snaps in. So I'm going to go ahead and take that off. So I got the clips out of the lens is still on it, but this back piece, you might have to give it a little tug or so, but it's loose. Those 4 bolts, there it goes. The 4 bolts are what holds it. Now here's what I'm doing today is my servos messed up my Tach. So I'm going to take one out of another instrument cluster and see if it, here's my Tach right here. What it does, it'll go up to say 3 or 4, but it doesn't come back down. So if I'm on the highway and it goes up to 3 or 4 while I'm doing 70 miles an hour, and then I get off the off ramp and I'm sitting at a red light or a stop sign, it might come back down to 3. So then when I take off again, it goes back up. It'll use 3 as a 0 and go up to, 5 or 6. Then eventually it'll work its way all the way up to just buried. And then for no reason whatever, I'll turn the car off and it'll 0 down. Sometimes it doesn't 0 down. It'll just be up around 6 or 7 for weeks. And then occasionally, or once in a while, it'll just drop back down. So what I'm going to do is, I noticed on the cluster for the 2003, which is it looks the same. They're white plastic. These are black. But every one of these was the same. They all had the same number. Every one was the same. So my theory is every one of these little drive motor servos for the needle is the same. And what makes their function different is the programming sent to it. So what I'm going to try to do here is I'm going to test that theory. I'm going to replace the Tach, which is this one. I'm going to replace this Tach servo. I don't know. It may not be bad. It may be an electrical issue somewhere else. But for now, this is where I'm starting. I'm going to replace this Tach servo with a fuel servo from a 2003 Beetle. And if my theory is right, then the fuel servo will work as the Tach servo. If my servo is bad, then that should solve my problem. So that's where we're at now. Let me get this lens off, which it's unclipped. It's really fragile. The plastic right in here, just be careful with spanning those. So I'm going to work at this real easy and put the phone down, put the camera down, and get this off without trying not to break it. This has to come off because I got to pull the needle off of the Tach to pull that servo out. The servo just unplugs from the board right there. You just pull it, take these little rubber stoppers off. There's one right there. There's one right there. And then that little servo, I'm calling it a servo. I don't know what it is. Drive motor, servo. But it just unplugs from the board right there. And they're all the same. So as I said, I'm going to try to take a fuel one, replace that Tach one with the fuel one. So let me set the camera down and get this off and try not to break it. So I got it out, and what you want to do is, you got a little more relief on the bottom, so you want to get these two bottom ones out and not so much pry on those. And once you get the bottom out, it should kind of wiggle. There, wiggle it down. And that comes out. We'll clean this up real good too while it's apart. So now what we're going to do to get this off, just pull this cap. The cap comes off, and it'll slide off the needle. See that? The cap comes off and slides off the needle. It's got a little hole in it. You can just grab this needle by hand and pull it. Usually they'll pop right out. I'm going to get that with some needle nose pliers though and give it a tug. Yeah, that one was on there pretty good. But see, I just got it with some needle nose pliers and pulled it. So now that the needle's out, we can flip this over. Take these little rubber stoppers off. And of course, I've got like the 20-inch needle nose pliers. So once that's out, then let's wiggle this. And this is just going to unplug from the board. See that? This one doesn't, I have to look. I don't see any numbers on this one. On the 2003, there was no part number on any of them stamped in the plastic, which appears to be the same with this one. It's all smooth, but there is a label on the back, and they all have the same number on that label. I don't hear any rattling or anything like this is bad. But now what I'm going to do is, I'll get the 03, and I'll pull the one out for the fuel and put it in place of the Tach. And we're going to see if that's going to... That's my theory, that these are all the same, and their function is just by the signal they receive from the board. So here's the one for the 03, and you can see this guy wasn't too friendly taking it out. See, this plastic is brittle. I got this in the junkyard. I plugged it in. It worked. It was fine. I had the mobilizer light, so I want to get rid of that. But we'll see here. I'm going to do the same thing on. I'll take this speedometer, or this fuel gauge off. Yeah, see, that one I could just grab a hold of. And there it is. Now see, this one has these tag numbers on the back, and they're all the same. It's like a time, date, shift, manufacturing number, and there is a CEC1 number, 5139. It's a 30, it looks like. But it's all the same. I checked those. So this one appears to be the same as this one. It just looks like the internal gears on this one, see, they're green and white, and the internal gears on this one are black and green. So I'm going to slap that in there and see if this solves my Tach. Now when you put this back together, the fuel gauge needle is shorter than the Tach needle. You can see this might be difficult with one hand, but you got that little hole there. So you want to put this on. You can do it before or after, it doesn't matter. It's a little easier if you do it before you put the needle on. Slip the needle through that hole. Clip the cap to it. So here's my Tach. And then it just line it up, push it on. So there it is. I got it on there. It's pushed on. It's on the 0. I'm a little weird on the angle of the camera. It looks like it's above the 0, but it's on the 0. Just a thing to note, when you pop that on, you might want to hold on to the servo piece on the back, because you can push it loose. And you don't want to push it on so far that it's actually touching. Leave a little bit of gap there. So we'll put the lens back on it, and I'll go put it in the car and see what that does. The Tach wasn't working, so it can't get no worse. Got that all back together. Didn't break no clips. Yeah, to sum it up, the fuel servo little motor, plug and play. Well, plug, we don't know if it's going to play till we hook it up. That's my old Tach, plugged right into that one where the fuel gauge was. I went ahead and put it back in there. It didn't work on my Tach, but I took that fuel servo and put it on my Tach. We're all back together. And I'm going to go put it in the car and see what I got. Probably should have did this part of the video first, but to get this out, this is the bezel ring that's around here. It just pulls straight off. Grab it with both hands on each side and just pull it. It'll pull straight off. To get the cluster out, you got a screw right here. It's a T20 torque and a screw right here. Now, when you get the cluster off, be careful because it is piloted in a hole right here. So just kind of wiggle it, pull it. Now, the wires will only let you get so far. The trick here, I guess if there is a trick, the blue harness on the left-hand side is a little shorter than the green harness. See that? So you can get if you get the cluster forward, and these clips are down here locked. You got to unlock this clip. It'll snap up, and as it snaps up, it'll slide the plug out. But this clip has to be all the way snapped and locked in the up position to get this clip out, or to get it back in, this plug. To get it out or in, the clip has to be all the way up. And then once you get it in, you'll kind of feel it pull, and then when you bring this down and lock this down, it'll pull it the rest of the way in. So that's you got to release that lock, and this one is the same way. And that's what makes it a little bit of a trick to get out. But if you get this side out first, do the right side, get the green plug off first. You can see it's longer. And then that gives you room to turn it. And what I like to do, I need to get it when I put this back together. I like to lay a rag or something across here, because the corners of this, they will scratch up your rubber that's on there. So that's about it. And then the same thing, putting it back in. I'll put it in, and you can see the blue one's shorter, so it's going to kind of go in cockeyed on an angle. We'll get the blue plug in, and then I got all kinds of room to get the green plug in, and then it's just jiggling it to get that. There's a stem right here. It kind of snaps in a little bit. See how it's got a flowered head on it? It kind of snaps in that little pilot hole right there. So once we get it plugged in, then we'll wiggle it, and we got a guide right here and a guide right here. We want to be careful not to bust those off. So that's it. There's just 2 screws. These can be a little bit of a pain, especially if you don't know that you have to unlock this. They're snapped down. They can be. I can get under them with my thumbnail and snap them up, and then bring them all the way up and lock them open. Do the green one first, then the blue one. It's usually not a problem. I got it setting in there. So now the moment of truth. Let's see if we got a Tach. I don't know. It's been so long since it's worked right. I don't know if I get any movement by just putting the key in. And my steering wheel's locked, so. Okay, so there. I got nothing. The gas gauge went up, so that's working. So here it goes. Let's start it and see if the Tach works. Look at that. I haven't started this thing in a couple weeks. About a week. Everything seems to be working. See, before when I would rev it, the Tach wouldn't zero back down. So evidently that servo was bad. And that proves my theory there that the speedometer, the gas gauge, and the Tach all run off the same servo. What makes the difference of their function is the program that's sent to that servo. And obviously, I would assume the length of the needle has something to do with it. The fuel gauge needle is real short. But yeah, it's working. I'll see if when I get my idle down, it's only about 28 degrees here today. So it's going to idle up for a while. But that seemed to solve that tachometer issue. And that's pretty good to know that, okay, if it's the same servo for the fuel, the Tach, and the speedometer, if you go to the junkyard and replace one of those, the one you're going to want to get is the fuel gauge, because the fuel gauge is going to have the less work on it over time. As where the speedometer, it's going to always be moving. The tach, it's going to mostly be moving. The fuel gauge is roughly just going to move when you fill it and when you use fuel. I'm happy with that. I've had this car for 3 years. The tach's never worked right. So let me shut it off and see if it zeros. Yep. See, before, wherever I would shut it off, it would stay. So if I was at 1 and I'd shut it off, it would stay at 1. So the next time I would start it, 1 would be 0, and I'd be idling at 2. And then when I'd shut it off, I'd be stuck at 2. Then the next time I'd start it, 2 would be 0, and I'd be idling at 3. And the tach would be running, 6 to 7, until eventually it worked its way all the way up. I think, and then periodically it would just, I'd get in the car and shut it off, or start it and shut it off. And every once in a while it would go back to 0. I got to put these 2 screws back in here. And like I said, I should have made a video taking it apart. This just kind of pops off. You got a clip up in here in the top. You got to watch and make sure you get it. But it'll just snap right on. So to take that ring off, I like to get it with 2 hands on both sides so I don't break the clip. But I just had it off. So just kind of wiggle on it and it'll pull right off. Sometimes the little insulation will come off and stay on there. Or it'll move around. This one's glued in pretty good still. So you see you got little marks on the insulation that you got to line up. Actually, this clip is broke. See these little metal tabs? There's a metal tab right there. There's one right there. There's also supposed to be one right here in the middle. And it's broke, evidently. Gone. I don't know that it's broke, but it's definitely... it just looks like it's missing. I'll have to grab one of those. So that's it. That's it. If you ever want to take this shell off, pull the speedometer out, the cluster just the way it was, and there's 2 bolts on the top, Torx, 2 on the bottom, and that'll release this whole shell right here. So just to follow up on that tach, I've been driving it for the last couple days. I put 67 miles on there because the speedometer reset the trip when I took it out the other day. But the tach is working fine. So interchanging that servo drive motor solved my tach issue.